Hello, and thank you for contacting Wave Support. I see from your clinical request that you have a pretty challenging patient here who's had a complicated surgical history. And just a couple thoughts. I know the patient has been rather unsuccessful in traditional RGP lenses, but I always try to keep in mind that there's a lot of limitations with traditional lenses. Most of them are probably spherical. They may have tried like a reverse geometry lens, but keep in mind Wave has the ability to have sort of free form back, so we tend to get a little bit better fit in general. With that said, if we talk about the right eye for a moment, as you know, that patient is very flat centrally due to the intact lens implants. But if you look at the cornea, it really looks like a patient who's had a very successful LASIK surgery. And so really I would almost treat this patient as a post-operative LASIK fit. And you could probably fit this patient in one of three ways. Since you have quite a bit of corneal data for the right eye, I would probably see if we can do something on the cornea, either a traditional large diameter lens using more of a free-form approach for stability, or if you wanted to go to a semi-scleral design or a mini-scleral design. So I mocked up a couple lenses here. The first one you'll see that I did was about 11.3. I went almost the full size of the corneal diameter, and I just went into a free-form design. I placed the anterior optical zone at about the start of the red area in that lower right quadrant, and the blue about halfway through that area of steepening. And then I just did a free-form design. You'll see you get a lens that follows that contour very nicely. I also chose to go a little bit of back surface asphericity to smooth out the back surface of that lens, to try to get a little bit more even, smooth contours. And my guess would be if you're going to put a lens on cornea, I would go super large like this, reduce movement, and you'll probably find that this lens is rather successful as is. You'll notice that in this design I didn't include the refractive data, which you'd have to put in there. Another alternative would be just to go to a semi-scleral design, and since you have quite a bit of corneal data, you'll probably do pretty well with this design. And basically for this, I went to Tools and clicked on Large Diameter Lens, which gave me about a 14 millimeter diameter. And then to clean it up, I just followed some of the pointers in the 8-step fitting process. If you recall, that includes increasing the central area to about 10 microns clearance, then using the 50% quadrant in the quadrant control in the superior and inferior quadrants to create a little tear film exchange, moving this pink dot to just shorter than the, just right inside the overall visible iris diameter, and then pinning at about 20 microns, and that would give you a nice starting point for a semi-scleral lens. In this case, either of those designs would probably work well with this patient. The other alternative, of course, is a full scleral design. The challenge with this full scleral design is, as you know, you're basically fitting a lens onto a landing area that you don't have much data for. This particularly becomes a problem in that left eye that has had the corneal transplant, because if you look at the topography for that left eye, I'll bring it up here a little bit if we can. As you know, you've got a very steep area central here, so all that Wave is going to see is steepness on here. So any lens that you design is going to be based on this steepened area. So you'll probably get a lens that fits kind of snug out here in the periphery. But if you have nothing else to go with, what you can do is go to your topography, go to your Wave software, click on Tools, and as a starting point, just click on Semi-Scleral and let Wave design use this kind of a fitting lens. Now ideally, if you have the OCT fitting set, it would be ideally helpful in these situations. For these challenging patients, I like to put one of those lenses on. It really takes a lot of the guesswork out of where you're going with this patient. And I find that this scleral designs can be very, very helpful and successful, but I always try to go as small as possible to begin with. Couple comments. You were concerned about the compression in that area with a semi-scleral. I've got a couple of patients who are wearing a semi-scleral lens after PK surgery, and they seem to be doing well with that. The key is obviously you have to be careful that you don't have too much compression along those junctions of the graft. When in doubt, and the reason I went with a semi-scleral is I could not get a scleral design to feel comfortable in that patient's eyes, so I went down a little smaller diameter and was successful. That's where the value of using a OCT type fitting set can be very helpful. Again, if you don't don't have one, then what I would do is I would empirically fit this patient just as a starting point. Use tools. For the left eye, go to semi-scleral design a sort of a fitting lens for this patient. At least you have a good starting point. I would also, when the patient comes in, if you can, if you have just a rigid lens of known parameters that you can put on the eye just for a couple minutes, and what that'll do is it'll allow you to put a lens on that you know the true radius of curvature spherical lens, and get an over refraction over the top of that. I find that tremendously helpful in getting to the end point refractively with these patients. So instead of relying on just the refraction, which is not always perfect in some of these patients, I will put say I have say a 720 lens and a power of -6. I put that on the patient, get an over refraction, and then when I'm designing my final lens, I'll put this trial lens data in, and that'll help clean up the over refraction for this patient so you get a lot more workable lens. Well, with that said, I wish you well with this patient. These can be very big challenges, and I understand you're working under unique circumstances with this patient. But again, the right eye, I would look at it as almost a post-LASIK patient, and I would try either semi-scleral or a large on-corneal lens. Since you're probably going to have to go on to the sclera on the left eye, then I'd probably either do the mini scleral in the right eye or go to full scleral. So anyways, I wish you well with this patient, and thank you for contacting Wave Support. Have a great day.